see. My name's Donna. I'm an addict.
Hey, Donna.
Can we get another moment of silence real quick? Thank you. Well, as I said earlier, I woke up with 14 years, 2 months, and 8 days clean. And I started this journey actually here in this area. I started this journey on a ride of hope, basically just holding on by my skin and going cold turkey, hoping I didn't have to use again. And I'd done it before for a couple of years, and then I relapsed. And then this time I started cold turkey when we moved up to this area. I want to say right before we moved to this area. And I didn't know anything about the program, because where I lived before here was out in the country in Illinois, and there was no program or people like doing that kind of thing. Everybody was just doing what they weren't supposed to be doing. And even now today in that same area, there's only one NA meeting, and it's probably about 12 miles away. So I didn't have exposure to the meeting. So when I first moved up here, I didn't know anything about recovery or the 12-step programs. I just was cold turkey. So trying to deal with life on life's terms, but I couldn't do it. I worked, and I took care of my kids. I was married, and I made sure they went to school. I went to their activities and stuff, but I didn't do much socializing because I was so scared. I was so scared to use again, and I knew I would because I'd relapsed before in my own personal life. So I just really didn't have a very good social life. I didn't go anywhere after work with any of my work people because, what happens? Where do they want to go? Let's go have a drink. Nope. Because I know what's going to happen. That's not going to be good enough for me. The next thing is going to be, this doesn't give me the feeling I want. Going to go find my DOC, and good luck, goodbye. I created a lot of misery around me, nearly destroyed my marriage that was brand new at the time. I have, what I said, like 14 years and 2 months clean. I've been married for 15 years, so you do the math. I already had destroyed quite a bit of that marriage before it even began. And so I just really was kind of closed off from the world, kind of like a recluse. I was like a workaholic. That was the only social life I had, was my customers. Like, I went to work and I worked my behind off, and I stayed clean, but it just happened to be that I stayed clean. Then my kids got older and they started getting into the drug scene, and it was very, very scary because, they're doing drugs all in my house, like in my basement, and I'm giving CPR to people. Like, I was doing that, and it was really scary. And I didn't know what to do. I was desperate. The first thing, I want to say my first exposure to the program was in 2010. My daughter was using heroin, and sorry, I didn't mean to drug log. I didn't mean to do that. But anyway, she was using, and I was desperate to help her because I thought she would die, and I was sure she was going to die. But being a mom and being an enabler and a codependent, I thought that I could help her by making sure she had a place to lay her head and feeding her and stuff like that. And then I just got desperate. So I asked a really good friend of mine to come over because I knew that I couldn't do what I needed to do. And I was like, I need to get her help. I need to get her checked in somewhere. So she's like, okay. She's like, I'm coming over. And then I said, if I said to her, you have to go get help or I'm going to call the police. And she said, well, then call the police. And she jumped out the window in her bare feet and ran down the street. And I turned around, and my best friend's face is right here. She's like, call the police. I was like, I didn't want to call the police on my kid. And she was like, you have me here for a reason. Dial the number. So I dialed 911. I had my kid arrested. She got her first felony charge. She was 17, and she went to jail. And then the first thing they tried to do was get her help, of course, because she was a minor. So they wanted to send her to a treatment facility somewhere up north. She left jail in shackles and got taken to treatment, and she was put into the adolescent program. And when she got out, they make you go to those family support group meetings and like how to deal with life with a addict that's trying to recover or whatever. That was all fine and dandy. I was like, okay, yeah, like make sure she has breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Got it. That kind of stuff. So when she got out and she came home, I drove her home. She got home and she said, I'm supposed to go to a meeting. I go, what? What are you talking about? She's like, I'm supposed to go to a 12-step meeting like NA, like Narcotics Anonymous. And I was like, what is that? And she's like, well, they suggest that you go right away, like your first day after getting out. I was like, okay, where are they? I'll drive you, right? And she said, Mom, you should go too because you're an addict too. And I was like, what? But all along, there was a period of time that I knew that I needed to carry the message. Like it was an instinct thing. So my kids always brought a lot of their friends home and over, and my house was pretty friendly and heartwarming. So I would talk to all of them, and then I would talk about how I used to be a drug addict. But I used a little harsher term than that because I didn't know anything about the program then. So I would say that to people. At one point, my other daughter would say to me, "Can you please stop telling my friends you're a head?" Because I was like, okay. Like, I didn't know, but I just wanted them to be okay. I didn't want everybody to be, like, live the life that I did or be in that position. And so that's how my daughter was able to say, you need to go too because you're an addict too. And I was like, okay. So I went to that first meeting in Romeoville on a Saturday morning. It was December 7th, 2010, and I never left. I've never quit going since. I knew the moment that I went into that meeting, I belonged there. This was my home, and this is my family. And some of the women that I met that day are still in my life today, and they're still in recovery, and I'm so blessed by them. Yeah, my sponsor is one of the first people I ever met. She wasn't my sponsor at first. She wasn't my first sponsor. She's my sponsor now, though. That meeting has moved around quite a bit since then, but it's a good meeting. And I guess I started working the steps. I'm on my first round of 12 steps, almost done with the 12th step. I started working the steps with my first sponsor, and then when I changed sponsors, I had to start again, which is normal. I started over. When I got to the 4th step, in my first round, things got a little crazy in my life, and when I did my first personal inventory, I discovered so many things about myself and my life. I kept thinking that one of my best qualities was I was an honest person. I didn't know what honesty meant at all until I came to this program and learned from you people. Because I was a good person, I always assumed that I was an honest person. It's not the same thing. It's just not the same thing. You can't convince somebody that something's good for them just because you know it's good for them and tell them a lie to get them to do it. That's not being honest at all. Although, even though you know it's good for them, that doesn't mean you shouldn't tell them the truth. You have to be dead honest. It's the only way everybody in the situation is going to grow. So during that whole time period when I was also first coming into the program, I also was getting my foster care license. So the thing about that is, I was actually just discussing this with one of my family members today. There is nothing that I did differently than most of you in here when I was out there using. The thing is, I have a higher power. I choose to call my higher power God. I've always been kind of in touch with my higher power. I can tell a lot of times when I'm doing my steps along the way, I've rediscovered my higher power. So in the beginning, I thought I was kind of a religious person. I was pretty devout, and I had a lot of faith. And growing up, I went to church. I was exposed to all of that. At some point, I was a nursery director for a church for like 5 years when I lived in another state. So all that stuff, I say all that because when I worked the steps, it was like meeting an old friend again, like years later, and discovering new things, discovering that relationship again, and being able to form my own relationship with my higher power, which is amazing. But in the process, I found out some things about myself and my character defects, and I started to work on those things, and I'm definitely a different person today. I have a lot of communication now. I still work the program exactly as a newcomer should. I don't do 90 and 90 anymore. Sometimes it's necessary. I'm not going to say I will never do that again. I'm sure that if I need it, my higher power will let me know it's time to do that kind of thing. I still go to probably at least 3 meetings a week. I'm in service. I work the steps with a sponsor. I talk to women. I have a humongous network. I probably have more phone numbers in my phone that are recovery related than any other phone numbers. I mean, there's probably close to 500, and they're all over the country. There's a couple all over the world. I've had the good fortune of being able to travel a lot. At the beginning of my recovery, I went to conventions like they were rock concerts. I swear to God. And I was a junkie, not just because I liked the feeling and the energy, and I needed that in the beginning to grow. Everybody has their forte, like their thing that they really like and that works for them. Some people find that in service work. Some people find that in meeting making. Some people find that in working the steps or reading the literature. Whatever your thing is, tap into it, because it's not that you don't need it all. You do need it all. You need balance. You need it all. It says in the literature, if you work it, just like they say, if you go to meetings and you are in service work and you work the steps and you have a sponsor and you do all those things, you will never use again. This program has proven itself over and over and over again. So the thing is about that, but the thing is everybody has their thing, like what makes them tick. So like if you find out that your thing is service work, then get in it, because that's what's going to keep you clean, because you're tapped into something that you have a passion about. So if your thing is writing, then write. You have a passion about that. That's how you're going to stay clean. Like that's where your power is, your program is. I started, like I said, I came into the program around 2010. I do have 14 years clean, so obviously I was 5 years clean when I started to come to meetings, and that was one of the first things I had to share, because I would raise my hand for, sorry, I keep looking at Rob because he reminded me of this. I don't mean to call you out, but like, I remember on a Wednesday morning, I was at a meeting sitting next to him, and they like, you know how they say, if you have a year or more clean and you're available to sponsor, please raise your hand. And I'd raise my hand, but one time I was in a meeting and I raised my hand and I just, for some reason, blurted out, I have more than a year, but I cannot sponsor anybody. And he's like, I love that. You're so truthful. And I was like, I need to say that. Like, I need to say that. Sometimes you're ready and sometimes you're not. Your process is your process. And hopefully, by the time you're ready to do that, you have a nice sponsee family that will help guide you. I know I do things differently with my sponsees than maybe Betty does with her sponsees, because in my family, I have found that through experience that having sponsees without working a 4th step is just dangerous. It's just dangerous. It doesn't matter how many years you have clean, if you haven't done that kind of step work, you don't have what it takes, because you're going to go through a metamorphosis yourself once you do your personal inventory. So it's just a personal thing, and every sponsee family is different. I mean, we all have like suggestions and guidelines and things that I guess we have expectations as well. Like, when I get a new sponsee, I'm like, call me every day for 30 days. And then I ask them why. How come? Because I don't want them to be afraid to pick up the phone and say, I need help. And if you get in the habit of calling your sponsor every day, you're not going to think twice about calling her up when you're really hurting. And then the more you build that network, the better it is. And that's how I built my network, was going to conventions in the beginning. But I started in 2010. In 2012, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. That was tough, because at the beginning, I had lost a lot of feeling in my hand. I couldn't write. I had to quit my job, because my job was At the time, I was a bank manager. I was working at home, but it was a really tough job. I had to type, I had to count money, I had to do all these things, and I only had one hand. It was really rough when I first got diagnosed. I couldn't see a lot. I had migraines. I suffered from severe migraines 24/7 for probably the first year, I want to say. And now I'm looking at Conrad because I have a lot of experience with Conrad because him and I met in the midnight meeting in this room. And he is like a dad to me. I guess a big brother. He's like a dad. He's like a dad to me. But he showed me things like, for example, he showed me how to like nicely chair a meeting and be able to tell somebody, you're out of line, or how to like give people pull-ups. And, because he's, it's something to be said for the newcomer and something to be said for the veteran, I guess, what we call predecessors, because, there's a lot of us, I've been told by a predecessor, sorry, you're gagged. You're on a gag order. Like, you cannot talk in a meeting for the next 10 meetings or whatever. I had to listen. I also learned about the concepts. I learned about the traditions. I learned about the Guide to Local Services. I studied that thing. If you really want to do things like that, you have to have the knowledge, because you don't want to lead somebody astray, or you don't want to be the one to be like, oh, well, yeah, but we don't really have to do that because whatever. But everything is in place. The 12 steps, the traditions, the concepts, nothing has changed about them, and they still work. They stand the test of time because they work. We don't have to change them because it works, even in this day and age. And as society changes with social media and all that, there's new policies that come out. Like NA has a social media policy. They have things like that. But the thing is, the essentials still work. They stand true in every meeting, in every convention, in every area, everywhere in the world. So that reminds me, I'd like to share something really cool with you guys. This whole entire time that I've been coming to Narcotics Anonymous, I've had going to a meeting in another country on my bucket list. And in April, I got to do that. That was the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. And I went to a meeting in Malta, which is between Greece and Rome. It's this little island that's its own country. It's actually got a humongous wall around it. It's actually like a fort that became a country, its own country. And they have their own language. They speak Maltese there. It just happened to work with my itinerary. I was on a cruise with my husband. He was celebrating his 40th birthday, and we were celebrating our 15th wedding anniversary. We went on the cruise. We were gone for, how long? We were gone like 3 weeks.
Like 2 years.
I think we were gone for like 3 weeks. And we went all over the place. But anyway, that worked out with our itinerary. And when I was on the cruise, so this is the second cruise I've gone on since I've been in recovery. And on the cruise ships, they also have recovery meetings, okay? And I would go at the same time every day, same room, whatever, and I would go as often as I could when it fit my schedule with my everything else. But I needed that. It's like taking an addict out of the confinement and protection of all the familiarity and putting them in a bar. Like, it's really what happens when you're on tours, because first thing that happens, we're in Greece, right? Ouzo, free. Wine, free. Italy, we were in Italy, we were in Greece, we're, all over the place and everywhere we went. God bless my husband. I swear to God, he's been a huge support. And that's the other thing too. Tap into the people that really have the right heart for you. My husband, the very first place we went, the very first tour we went on, they tried to give us ouzo. They were walking around giving us snacks and ouzo, and they brought it out. They started to hand it to my husband, and he said, "Sorry, we don't drink." And he does. He can. He's a normie, And I was like, "Why'd you say that?" I'm like, "You can drink if you want." He's like, "I'm not drinking when I'm with you." He's like, "That's not what we do." He's like supporting me, So we never drank the whole time, and I never saw it again after that. He was like running interference, because that's how we do for the people that we love. We protect each other. We look out for their best interests. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what it is. You do that. So my experience with the program has been, when I found out I had MS, I told some people, of course I told my sponsor and I told a couple other people, inundated with people's phone numbers and names of people who already have gone through some of it before me. I got names of men, women, people with children that had MS. So I pretty much, in this area, I pretty much know everybody that has it. And I've talked to them. At the beginning, I talked to them because I talked to them when I had trouble with medication. I talked to them when I didn't have trouble with medication. I had talked to them when I couldn't get my doctor to answer the phone. So there's been a couple ups and downs. For example, I want to say almost 3 years ago now, about 2 years ago. No, it was 3 years ago, I was hospitalized because I went blind. Okay, in my MS, I got optic neuritis. My vision was 420 and 20. Yeah, so that's basically blind, right? And I was driving, and I did not know. I was like, man, I can't really see the street signs. No, I was driving on I-355 South, and I could not read the green signs above me. Like, that's blind. I was like, oh, I should probably tell somebody. She's laughing because she's a nurse. I went to my neurologist. No, I didn't. I went to my eye doctor. I was like, hey, I can't see. Can I get in? And I was already seeing an optical, neurological eye doctor because it's a common thing when you have MS that you get optic neuritis, which is what that's called. So I went in there and she's like, whoa, you have to go straight to the emergency room. So she called my neurologist. My neurologist met me and I went straight upstairs. Stayed there for a week. And the reason why I had to stay there for a week is because I also have a lot of adversities and allergies to the medications that treat MS. I am allergic to steroids. I'm allergic to corticosteroids, which is a life-saving drug that they give people that are having an allergic reaction. I can't even take that. So the things that they had to give me IV, they had to keep me in there for a week because I have adverse reactions, so they had to watch me. I cannot tell you, probably at least 4 women in the program visited me in the hospital but sat with me. My own sponsee at the time was in nursing school and almost done, and she sat with me a whole entire day, and it just works out. Every time I have an experience, my higher power shows up and gives me an example of why he's still there for me. That's a really good example because my sponsee was there and she was talking to the nurse that was babysitting me in my room, to make sure I didn't have an anaphylactic shock attack or whatever. And they got to talking about nursing school, and she started telling her how she was almost done and in this program and blah blah blah, and all of the stuff she knew. Well, in the meantime, somebody on the floor in one of the rooms next to me arrested, red coated. So they're like pushing buttons, alarms are going off, and she looked at her and was like, can you stay with her? She's like, I got it. And she ran out of the room, and so now I'm being babysat by a person in recovery, my sponsee. But you know what? I knew I was fine. And that was just not me. I don't do any of that stuff. I've experienced birth, I've experienced death, I've experienced many things in this. But because of the gifts of this program, and like I said before, I'm a foster parent now, but we were talking earlier about, was I ever arrested? I said, no, I was never arrested. I would never be able to be a foster parent. But that doesn't mean I didn't do what you guys did. I didn't do what everybody did to get arrested or not get arrested or end up in jail or end up in treatment or end up psychiatrically hospitalized or whatever it is. I did all those things. It just wasn't my path. That's not what my higher power had in plan for me. My goal, my path from my higher power was to become a foster parent, to be able to foster children. And I've been doing that, almost 10 years now. 9.5 years, and I've had 15 placements. So basically I tell everybody I have 18 children, which I do. For the most part, out of those 18 children, I still have contact and relationships with probably 14 of them out of the 18, and that I see still, And I love that. I love it because now I'm having grandchildren and I'm about to have my 13th grandchild in like 2 weeks. So it's been exciting, and I am so totally blessed. I cannot, every single day, every single minute's a gift. You know, it is. And I don't even know what time it is. Oh yeah, good. I'm done. I'll keep coming back.